Hey, long days and pleasant nights. Welcome back to Walk Along the Beams, our episode 7. And we're talking about the last book in the series of the Gunslinger Saga, The Dark Tower itself. Most of our panels here, we got some guy, Phil's coming late. Unfortunately, Namman has not been feeling well. Best wishes towards him. But we got my dude Trev, right here. We got Nornrad, and we got Steve, the White Walker.
The tower,
the tower.
Gonna say hello to the chat, and we're gonna get into it because there's a lot to discuss in this book. I mean, he went ham on what goes down in this book.
Mm-hmm.
So first off, we got my dude Las Cruces. What's up, Las Cruces from New Mexico? How you doing? We got a Chop and Drop. What's up, Chop? I love my dude Chop. We got and I met her the other day, and I'm trying to remember how to say it. It's Yay is what she said. She
Yay one. Nay.
Yeah, Yay. She was such a cool person.
Yay one A's. Yay one A's.
We got Chaney. Thanks for being here, Chaney. And
Chaney?
I do have a guest in the background. Looks like we got Phil making it to the stage. What's up, Phil?
Hey, everybody.
He's
All
alive.
right.
Let
Perfect
me know
timing.
if are you getting any interference from my dehumidifier?
Mm-mm.
Okay,
Nope.
Let me know. If not, I'll kick it off.
You sound good and fine. So like I was saying, you made it here perfect timing. I just said hi to everybody and that and so far, but people will trickle in and out. We'll say hi to them as they come in. So this book, 1999, and look, we got Phil's Treehouse right there. What's up, Phil? That's first Phil.
Phil.
The other
So released 6 months after the last book, these books came bam, bam, bam in succession. So we have the Dark Tower, and it's broken down into formal chapters this time, and not stanzas or, I don't understand his format from each book, but I do appreciate this book because of the traditional chapters that he stuck with. So we break out basically one of my favorite parts of the book, but part 1, the Little Red King, Dan TT. Callahan and the Vampires is such a dope scene. We pick up the journey right where we left off. We start off with Callahan and Jake off heading to the Dixie Pig, finding the Sigil, Matron the Turtle. They head in empowered. The battle is amazing, fighting off Lowman, Taheen, Type 3 vampires, and the Camtam Dr. Bugs. Eventually, the group is split with Oi and Jake heading further into the Dixie Pig. Callahan, while fighting the fight of his life, eventually takes his own life versus being turned and eaten. My first questions of the day for these fine gentlemen. There is a painting of Arthur Eld on the Dixie Pig. We get to see 2 versions of this painting throughout our story. What does this represent, and what are your thoughts towards the double-sided painting that we get to see inside the Dixie Pig? And I'm going to go with Philtastic.
I don't remember the first time that we saw it, but was that back?
We did see it in parts of Song and Susanna, and then they kind of featured it a bunch. And to give you, like,
Well, if I remember right, because at one point later in the story, I think when Roland sees it, he says it's like a perverted version of the original painting, right?
mm-hmm.
So my thought is if the picture, if the original painting was supposed to be like the Knights of the Round Table, or at least the core heroes, why don't we say, this is supposed to be the flip side. So they're pretty much in the den of absolute evil at this point.
Let's go, Trev. Let's go with you next. Get a new reader's perspective on your thoughts on the double-sided painting.
Maybe represent that there's 2 sides to his legacy,
Mm,
and
I like
there's
that.
the evil side to it.
All right. Steve, what you got for me?
I'm thinking that everything is written by the victors. So unfortunately, Gilead fell, and the victors have written their own version of the history, because that's always what happens, right? So that's what I was thinking about with that image. Of course, they want to make them look in the good light, and basically Arthur Eld is evil. He needs to
Mhm.
be pushed, right? So I mean, it's just like with the Jedi and the dark side. From the
Would
dark
it be a part? Would it be a
perspective,
part of?
yeah,
Would it be a part of history that's missing?
could be for at least that
Mm,
world.
mm.
Because again, there's multiple worlds. So how many
Yeah,
different versions of the defeat did we see?
they could be
The only thing,
both be
I like
true.
that. I like that. Aaron, what you got?
I I kind of agree with Steve. I feel like it was just them manipulating, trying to manipulate and build confidence in themselves.
yeah, like these are our people.
Oh, you think it was like a showboaster? You think it was like just for example, you think it was like a fake painting that the enemies used to like, show how badass they were, kind of thing. You think it's like
Fake
Propaganda.
that
propaganda. Yeah,
propaganda?
yeah.
Mm. Any thoughts into the Red King being a descendant of Arthur L? Maybe the painting was the first hint
Oh,
of that descendancy.
that makes sense because if Roland's related to Arthur L and Roland's connected to the Red King, then I don't know.
Because on one end we get to see the painting with Arthur Earl in his banquet hall with his knights and everything, it'd be Lancelot and all those good gents. And then on the flip side, we actually get to see like a cannibalistic version of Arthur Earl with like were things, Tahine, stuff like that.
Yeah,
Um, I always took it at like hinting at both Roland's lineage to Arthur Eld, and then now we find out that the Crimson King is also descendant of Arthur Eld. So it
yeah.
What
kind
if
of
he
like I always go
like
ahead.
what if Arthur L turned into the Crimson King?
Oh, and then
Right.
that is food for thought,
Mm.
and something like Phil had asked me a question.
Yeah.
Towards the Crimson King, behind stage, could Roland be a future version or a prequel to the Crimson King kind of thing?
Yeah.
Um, my answer straight out to that is no. As far, I mean, but that's not. It's not a definite no. It's not to say that because I don't know if we physically know the origin of the Crimson King, and that's me speaking to all my tower knowledge. I don't think
Mm.
we actually physically got like
No,
where he started. We got some of his, like
I
some
think
of
we
his
learned more about him in the other books, like the Black. I think you.
insomnia, and there's some parts, but it's just like this book. It's like very like thin parts of his origin. And
So,
right,
so
Well,
he's not like an evil half split off of Roland.
no, 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 no. As far
No.
as what we're gonna find out, he's dead. With all non spoilers ahead to the end of the book. And Crimson King is his own entity. He is like
it's kind of
now
your
going
interpretation.
back to going yeah, okay. Agreed and to interpretation. So that being said, what you said a second ago could be true because we don't officially know. Like we never really find out because there's some characters we do find out who they're like Walter, for instance. We
yeah, we
and
find out
they,
all
they
about
even
him.
go full more in detail in the next book in the series and for Walter. So in some characters he does go full blown. Crimson King is more like just some bits and pieces from the lore that make up Roland's journey kind of thing.
They talk about him quite a bit in Black House.
They do.
Mm.
Yeah,
See, I was thinking maybe he'd be kind of like, like how Maestro is an evil future version of the Hulk, maybe
yeah,
something like that. Or even, to be honest with you, I'm kind of shocked that he's not in some way related to Jake, just because since Songs of Susanna, it seems like there's been, I think, growing tension between Roland and Jake. Not so much so that they're at odds, but yeah, I think there's just definitely something brewing as far as Jake goes.
There is, and like eventually we're gonna get there, and I'll get your thoughts on that. But we'll get to that point when we get there. So I do have another question for this little part. So during the battle with Callahan, Callahan does renew his faith during the battle. Why during this moment was his faith renewed? And to give you context and my thoughts and why at this moment it was that important. You're talking about he had already lived a life where he lived in Magus, built a church, brought church to those people, was already spreading like the good Lord's word. We knew he didn't have that empowerment of like God behind him. In that moment in the Dixie Pig, as he's fighting those vampires, he is empowered by God again. Why in this scene? And let's go with Aaron. What you think about this scene?
The white.
Hmm.
I think he just landed on the side of the white. The white, yeah, it's just like fate, like Ka, like it had to happen. Basically, like I think the white empowered him, really not to help him, but to help Jake, so that Jake could go on and escape. And so it really wasn't about Callahan renewing his faith. I think that was just like a byproduct of what happened.
All right. Let's go with Trev. What you think about that? And Cheney says, I think it's his faith.
Yeah, the white spoke to him, and then Roland spoke through him. And I think even after he lost the or no, he threw down the turtle, didn't he?
I think in the moment he's still holding it. I think in the moment he was still holding it, and the turtle does get lost because he gets overtaken.
Yeah, he dropped it.
Because at one point he threw something down, and he just threw his hands out, his fingers out, and his fingers started to glow.
Yeah, that's cross
on top of him.
Yeah, I want to say it was his cross because at one point he didn't really need it anymore. You know, the
faith was shining. Yeah,
just flowing through. What's up, strange dog?
It was an epic way to go out,
dude. It was awesome.
On a blaze of glory.
And it kind of reminded me a little bit of. Did you guys ever see From Dusk Till Dawn?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The scene where I think the
That's
son is getting eaten. Yeah.
Same idea when the priest had his faith restored.
Yep.
And it could have been that same scene that Stephen King saw, and he was like, "I'm going to use that in my book."
Could be. He was watching that movie one night. He's writing away. I'm stealing that shit.
Because incidentally, that's the scene that comes up for me is when Harvey Keitel does that thing. It's right there. I love that movie. Sex Machine. Phil, what you got?
I'm not the resident theologian. I can't say the word.
Theologist.
Theologian. Yeah.
There we go. I'd have to ask Namman. Hopefully, Namman, if you're seeing this, you're feeling better. From what I remember, maybe about little like old school Bible, a lot of these saints and people of importance had to do these sacrifices basically to prove their faith. And here, I mean, look, he's in the den of these vampires. He's
the sacrifice is there.
Yeah, he's definitely sacrificing for this greater mission, and in that moment, it's like he's proved his worthiness to God or to the white, whatever you want to call it.
Love it. I think you hit it on the nail because that's one of the three things I was going to bring up before I go there. Steve, what you got?
I'm also thinking that now he's part of a group because he was such a loner for such a long time, wandering, and he had no real purpose. Like, I mean, he built the church and all that stuff, but he was an outsider. But then when the quartet came along and he's part of them now, that is, I think, the catalyst that renewed his faith because now he's part of something bigger than himself again, or maybe for the first time in his life. And now he's got something worth fighting for. So it was
Yes.
Oi and Jake. He was fighting for them. He's working with Roland. He's part of their quartet. I think that went a long way to restoring his faith.
In religious, let's say, ascension, you have to have the three major things, and one being family, faith, guidance. That all has to be there, right? But then you have to have the sacrifice. That's a big thing. And in that moment, not just one sacrifice, because he sacrificed himself to Lord, Maker, Holy Ghost, that kind of stuff. But then, to Roland and his quest, because that's really his final, cry off before he goes, is to wish Roland well and the hope, hopefully he breaches the tower, kind of thing.
Yeah, save the
Um,
universe.
the other thing is the selflessness that
Yeah. Jake
because
would
Jake doesn't
that
really have that, but Callahan does the second they walk in. Go ahead, Aaron. Sorry.
No, you're right. I was just saying Jake wouldn't have made it out of there without him.
Yeah. Even before they walk in there, he kind of knows what needs to be done, has to be done, and even then, before he's kind of momentarily taken over, it's easily like, yeah, that this is what needs to be done. Jake needs to make it through. We have to save Susanna. The tower is important, kind of thing.
And then Jake, badass.
Mm. And okay, so we're gonna get there. Okay, so let's move on to the next chapter because Aaron is right. Um, so we get lifted on the wave, and this book we do a lot of like perspective switching, and this is one of the predominant books where we get more like enemy perspectives, which we haven't really gotten from the whole series. I want to say the last couple times you could say that with Mia, but was Mia really an enemy combatant kind of thing? But okay, so we're lifted on the wave. We jump back to Roland and Eddie right after leaving Psy King, heading down a dirt road. They are hit with a wave from the beam failing. The two are taken avant-ka and are briefly get to see Susanna, Jake, Owen, and Callahan's death. That's when they intervene and kind of tell Jake to move on his merry way. And that's kind of that sum up the chapter. I don't really have any questions there. The next chapter, we move on. Eddie makes a call. While traveling, Eddie starts thinking about the rose and protecting it in a long-term fashion. He comes up with the plan to use John Cullum to head the Tet Corporation, with Deep Now, Tower, and Carver all being heads of the corporation. Sending John to New York to find the other three men is part of the plan. Continuing their journey, Roland spies a child of Roderick, a walk-in, shaven of Shevin, and finds directions to Fedek. Um, my question for this part is thoughts on walk-ins, like, and it could be anything towards that, but there is like kind of a general way I want to go. Phil, let me hear your thoughts on walk-in. Hey, what's up, Tina? I'm glad you could make it. Sorry you had to work late.
I just assumed it was a reference to another Stephen King novel I hadn't read. It's just the way that he presented it and the way he's kind of dabbled characters in. I figured that was a direct reference. I also thought for a second maybe it was a little bit of this other people or beings going between worlds. But as far as why they are coming in and going out, I hadn't really thought anything about that until more towards the end of the book. Some of that discussion, or the end of the of this reading, I should
segment.
say. Yeah. So
Trev, what you got? Oh, you
I
good?
just
Sorry.
thought of it as like the next stage of Athene, almost, where they can just freely walk between worlds.
Ooh, I kind of like that. I don't know if I ever pulled the thinny into this. I like that. Steve.
Well, since the beams are being cut and the tower it's weakening, now the worlds, the walls between the worlds are coming down. Everything is starting to cross over, and it's easier to walk between the worlds, especially in those nexus points. So that's my thoughts on what's going on with these walk-ins. I mean, it's easy to just do it. Some people have the innate ability to just cross over.
I think it just happens freely, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that since it's nearing closer to the end of the time, everything's just very thin right now. Like there's just thin walls between all realities, and so like just it's happening more now and easier.
And we see it's not just, we've come across it in this book and the last book, and we knew from, Cullum's tale that it had happened for a while, but I want to say representation from the beams breaking, right? And these fabric of the worlds coming together kind of thing. My one thought was like it was a perfect way to explain real life events like cryptoids, like Bigfoot, like um, the Jersey Devil, the Mothman, that kind of stuff. Like,
Mhm.
As a writer, you're trying to figure out this world that exists, and he adds real world stuff in there. So why not have like this concept of like, you know. People being able to cross worlds without having to use a magic door or without even knowing that they're crossing over, kind of like back with Callahan when he was,
Yeah.
going back between the territories, kind of thing. Um, but I always thought it was something like that, like him explaining like the what is it, the JB Swoony thing, the mystery robbery that they could never figure out. Those type of events where just people seem to mysteriously vanish and
Yeah.
just disappear, kind of thing.
See,
Um,
I don't I was saying towards the end of the reading, I didn't get a feeling that it was random. I thought maybe it was
it's not.
people, maybe the Crimson King sent to hunt down King himself.
We do find out that is a huge part of that. Not only, I mean, because okay, so as far as we know, all the walk-in recurrency is on Turtleback Lane, where King lives, and he's said to be the, navel of the story, kind of thing. He's the one that's spinning the yarn, and we do know at a certain point in our reading that the Crimson King has been sending out people to kill King, and they just, due to Ka, haven't been successful, kind of thing. So I want to believe that's a lot of the like walk-in interaction is, the Crimson King sending, things or people or what have you to stop Fred King. Another concept is it kind of explains some things within Stephen King's books, like if you think of it as a bigger picture, like how it is in Derry, Maine. There is a, he fell from space kind of thing, but it's also like when you read these stories, like, well, how would this lizard man be? And so I always took it as like him also trying to explain like how these monsters or whatever even show up in his worlds to begin with. Kind of a walk-in situation type of thing. Um, a big question for the night, and probably the first one. After seeing Roland release Shaven, Eddie questions whether he could do the same to any of the Tet as a reader. At this point in the story, was that a thought in your mind that Roland could just, with the wrong answer, turn around and just shoot Eddie in the face, or Jake, or Roy, or even Callahan for that point? At this point in your reading, do you feel like that was even an issue that the king needed to start in the back of your mind, kind of thing? And I'm going to go with Trev.
I'm going to say no. I'm going to
Hmm.
say that that's kind of like a distraction that he put there to get you to think that. But
Hmm. Phil, same sentiments?
I think 100% he would do it. I've said a couple times while we've been
Mm.
reading this whole series, I think that Roland's number one priority, no matter what you see him do, or no matter what you see him say in these chapters, is the tower. And every now and then, King has kind of speckled in where he has this sense of, hey, I have to keep my eyes on the prize. Because if you think about it, the one time that he didn't, which we saw in his past, it had disastrous results.
Yeah, Ka brings him back in horrible ways. And that's kind of why I had this question here, because I like both perspectives. Me as a reader at this point, I can't see Roland doing that. I don't, yes, I do agree with his, like, the motivation to the tower. What's up, Will?
the tower, the tower.
But I never questioned like whether Roland could go in that direction. So it is good to hear that is thoughts that came up in your mind during reading and stuff like that. And it's interesting going towards because I mean, we're not at the ending yet, you know. Um, Steve, while reading this, ever was that a question in your mind?
Yeah, it was. I went both ways between both what Trev said and Phil said, because I know he was definitely capable of betrayal. Absolutely, he could.
On multiple counts, right?
Oh yeah, he let Jake fall. So,
But
but
yeah, but after all the Jake situation,
Yeah, I
has
was
he
about to
shown
say.
betrayal? Yeah.
Yes.
he's got regret. Yes, he's a noble guy, but at the end of the day, everything serves the tower. Everything serves Ka, whether he
Precisely.
likes it
That's
or
true.
not.
That is true.
Right. So if he's told in his mind that he
So,
needs to sacrifice these people, he's going to do it without even a hesitation. It's like that faith.
so maybe the better question at this
I
point,
don't
and
think the
going,
White would tell him to do that,
that's
though.
what I was about to
No,
ask. Do you see
no,
Call or White? Like,
no.
hey,
You need to kill
Eddie's
this
got to
guy.
die. Yep, Eddie's got to die for the tower. Just get rid of him. You know,
Jake,
Aaron.
Jake even says later on in the story that he knows that Roland would leave him behind in a second for the tower. He knows Roland would repeat everything over again, the same way if he had to for the tower. Yeah,
Yes, he did.
and and then you got Eddie. He says, Roland's a tower junkie. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah, and that still comes up in this.
and
You know
this
what? Oh, sorry,
can't
go ahead.
really talk about it too much because it has to do with the ending, like the actual ending of the story more. But it's addiction is all I'm gonna say. Is like a major role
Yeah,
of the whole series. Addiction has been a major role of this.
yeah.
But Mike, I was thinking about this though. I mean, you're saying, would the White, say, hey, this person has to die in the name of the White?
Hmm.
At the same point, I mean, just a few minutes ago, we discussed how, um, what's his fate? Callahan had to die, he sacrificed himself in
Yeah.
order to be accepted by the White. So, I mean, when we're saying the White, we think of purity and all things good and great, but maybe at the end of the day, it's just another team.
It always reminds me of, and us being from comics, like some of that like comic logic that makes a shit ton of sense. But, like Ghost Rider has that pen and stare, and there's certain people that pen and stare doesn't work on, and it's just due to their ideology. Speaking, about Deadpool and Punisher and characters like that,
Mm-hmm.
their morality level of them killing people just doesn't, they don't see it as a sin kind of thing.
That's
So I
right.
also think, it's something like that. Like the White, you do think that, like pure, the godly, that kind of stuff. But it's not necessarily true in this case and scenario. It's more like the
Yeah.
side of good. But that's not to say that the good won't cross that boundary, because like Cheney brought up before, and this was part of that whole faint intertwined story. Roland, the tower did condemn Susan, for um
Did he let his woman die though, or was it
he
He didn't
didn't,
know
but
about it.
ball?
the
He was
tower
just obsessed with the ball.
yeah, he didn't. But I'm okay. Yeah, you could say he did,
The
because
grapefruit.
he wasn't supposed to interact with her from the get go, and that was that whole like "Caw comes like the wind." It was going to happen regardless. But like, I mean, if he would have chose to just kept riding past Susan, I mean, it wouldn't have been a thing, and she
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have died. She would have
She
married Mayor Thorne and moved on. Gave him a couple babies. And,
or Sheeny said it should have been him.
what's up,
He
Hector
wanted
Ortiz?
he wanted to take the blame instead of Susanna.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Sheeny said I should have been in her place.
I
But
think he just
okay, so
doesn't know
so think
anything.
about it, and so think about it in the ideological terms, as far as like what the good would be able to
Roland,
do versus what they can't do. Like the
another
good.
say,
Oh, go ahead.
Roland, Roland messed up Ka from the very beginning because he's really not even in the right quartet. Like
Yeah.
the true quartet is not the quartet he's with now.
Oh yeah, change. That is right. He knew she
I
was going
look
to
at
die.
it. I look
He
at
did
it
have that
as
choice.
there's so many worlds out there that he's tried with all the other quartets, and this is the only quartet that makes it.
Because see, his real quartet is Roland, Randall Flagg, and the man that killed or made Susanna paraplegic, the Pusher.
The Pusher.
Those are the three quartets. Those are the main three of the quartet, and they're not there. That's not what the quartet is right now. It's like everything's off track. Everything's been off track from the start.
This is the quartet that Roland wanted versus the one that he was supposed to quest with, kind of thing. No, but you think about it on a morality level, there are things that the good has done, can do, that kind of crosses that, like, this becomes evil territory because it has condemned people to death, sacrificed, that kind of stuff. So I mean, the line between, like, the white versus the red is very shady, as far as, like, I mean, it always reminds me of a video game or a board game, and both sides are on equal terms willing to do whatever it takes to get to that end goal scenario, kind of thing.
Just like in Star Wars, the Jedi and the Sith.
Yeah, where did you get that from, Aaron? That those three are part of the quartet?
That goes back to the gunslinger.
The drawing
Yeah,
of the
that's
three.
always
Yeah, the
been
drawing of the three.
He was
Like,
at the
we
doors.
go to the Pusher door, and he was supposed to draw the Pusher. He didn't.
Killed him
Like,
instead.
well, like
But how was Randall
his
Flagg?
well, go back to when he was chasing Randall, and, like, even what you know from Randall's death and stuff, that he wasn't supposed to be, like, killing or capturing or anything to do with Walter. He was just the next part of the plot to lead him to the tower, and Roland took him onto himself that this guy's a bad guy. Like,
and Randall
but
is on his own path to the tower.
mhm.
So they're both
he's
on a tower.
But, like, even I think Mordred and Walter, they both describe it as anti-Ka. Like Mordred now is a big part of the quartet. He shares Kef with him. He's connected in multiple ways, and it has nothing to do with him being a telepath, technopath. No, he's quartet. It's just there's an anti-Ka and an anti-version of the quartet. Roland,
This
Randall wasn't necessarily, like, the good side of the quartet, but that's not to say that Roland didn't need some bad side, to move forward, kind of thing. Think about the story if Roland would have been traveling with the thief or with the, how would his journey, like, progress to here? He wouldn't have had the issues of getting past the King's Men because he would have had a couple of King's Men and his companion.
Yeah, I mean, see, my observation, first one, we're talking about the colors in terms of comics and everything, and I'm not the aficionado on this, so, Chad, if you know better, let me know. I kind of equate the different colors more to what I remember from the New 52 Swamp Thing and Animal Man run, where it was like nobody was looking
Yeah.
to overtake. The object of it was balance. Keeping that in mind here, how do we know that even if Roland gets to the tower doesn't fall? Because
We don't.
if that's the case, the tower seeks balance amongst everything else.
And to iterate on that,
Excellent.
balance is brought up a lot, like,
Yeah.
especially with the chapter, Kashun. And balance, like, I mean, you think about it, a wheel can't turn, like, properly if it's all lopsided and shit. Balance plays a major part. I want to say the yin yang, like, that concept of yin and yang is there, the good and the bad, that has to be there, kind of thing, within this
Tower is
universe,
just,
kind of thing.
the tower is just a
What's up, buddy?
giant rechargeable battery that the beams are constantly charging, and the tower itself is charging the beams. And so it's like a giant generator or rechargeable battery, like I'm saying. But then the red and the white are completely separate, fighting over all of it. That's how I look at it.
I could go with that. All right. Let's move on to one of my favorite chapters of this reading. Chapter 4, Dan TT. Prophecy fulfilled. We are back in the underdepths of the Dixie Pig. We are with Mia and Susanna, now physically split, and they have the baby Mordred, the little red prince. Born from two fathers, Mordred is given to Mia to feed, and feed he does, drinking all of Mia dry, moisture all gone. She turns into a sack of dust. Um, During the confusion all sides, Susanna manages to kill most in the operating room, like wound Mordred by shooting off one of his spider legs, which I haven't explained that. He is a were spider. We quickly find out. With the help of the trustworthy Nigel, Susan makes her way into the FedEx New York door. Problem is, it's a one-way door. She believes and waits for Jake, basically, that he's going to come and make it to the door. Um, my question for this little segment: in the underground of the FedEx station, we see doors at different times, vacation, military advantage, maybe. Would this be something that you could see humanity was doing? A lot of dates come up, and if you know those dates or the locations to those times, most of them are really bad things. Like they talk about 9/11, they talk about like do you
Texas.
see the Oklahoma bombing. Uh, do you see this being a thing that we use as like a vacation thing, or like I said, a military advantage where like our leader, because this is actually a science that we've been kind of getting closer to. Like, um, do you think this would become like a hey, let's go to the movies type of scenario, and we watch 9/11 like over and over and over again? I'm gonna go with Steve. What you
Yeah,
think?
it's like the dark side movie night, right? This is the stuff that entertains the people, the enemy, the red,
Hmm.
all the people.
Cheney says, I feel like the tower is all the imagination of all the people in the real world created real. If it falls, there's no creative anymore, and without the creativity, life is over.
Well, they want to bring all the darkness, all those creatures from the outside that are just digging to get into our world. It's like
Kind of like
no,
the story.
Did
The
Kind of the same
darkness.
thing as the never-ending story. As soon as you put
Yeah, the nothing.
imagination was the book. But yeah, man, I love this part. Stephen King wrote it so good. You could visualize every single detail, like you were there. Like I wanted to draw this in a comic book form. Like as I was reading it, I was just like, man, this is completely scripted out. I could totally put this in a comic.
I
But
love
yeah,
Mordred.
the whole birth and everything is out. They're all sitting on the separate beds and
Hmm.
turning me
The weird machines over their head.
and for
turning
those
me in.
people in the chat that don't know about Nigel, Nigel's another robot. He's like Andy.
Hmm.
The butler.
We're gonna get more into Nigel because he plays. This is
Yeah,
basically like
Nigel,
because
he's crazy.
basically Susanna shoots out his eyes thanks to Eddie,
And
and
that
then
mess.
right after that starts asking for help. Like, hey Nigel,
Yeah.
Yeah,
we lost Trev.
Yeah, he froze for a while there, so I imagine he's having router problems again.
Hmm.
He'll be back.
also
See, we
helping
talked
Mark.
about Texas too much, and then boom.
That's
There you
what
go.
happened. The algorithm. Phil, what you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think Steve said it best. For these people, it's. I kind of equate it to like if your church is taking a bus trip down to like Atlantic City or something. Like they're saying, hey, take this door and witness 9/11 as it happened, that type of thing. And even the way that they spoke about it,
It was
you know,
mentioned earlier too, wasn't
what's that?
it? Wasn't there an earlier book that they mentioned this that the old ones would watch catastrophes of old
They
times?
did. They did. Actually, a couple different times because it's a huge reference to like well, background reference. Stephen King is hugely fascinated by the JFK murders. So that I mean, hence the book 11/22/63. That's actually one of the doors that comes up is the day
Yep.
when JFK was assassinated. Um, but I think that concept. Like would you go back in time during World War II? Kind of like the dead pointing to stop Hitler. Kind of thing. would
who
we
built
use? Hmm. Okay, then. So asking that question, would there be a moment in time, at just one specific moment in time, that you would go back to?
Just
the
to
building of the
observe.
pyramid.
Would you say,
I
Red?
want to
Building
know,
the pyramids?
if it's aliens or us.
What'd you say, Phil?
You're saying just to observe things?
Yeah, check it out.
I have to think about it. I feel like a lot of ancient history would just have some bad smells to it and whatnot.
Mhm. Steve, what about you?
I'm with Aaron. I'd want to go back to like Egyptian times.
I like the pyramid thing. I also like the Wild West thing because we know from history that our version of what happened during that time is a little convoluted. So
Maybe
I'd
like
kind of like to go back there.
hours of the dinosaurs, but not like
That too.
final
I was thinking
15
that.
minutes. Like I wouldn't want to
You'd be
be too close.
protected. You couldn't die in this scenario. You just get to view. It'd be like virtual reality kind of thing.
Or back to the NASA time and see if they really did go to the moon or not.
I mean, a comet that size, it only hits the Earth so many times.
Tina brings up a good question. Who are they reporting back to? And it's kind of a multiple answered question because we don't even know. Okay, so the Crimson King is like, him and his forces are the bad forces in the series. But technically, we learned that it's nothing that they created or made. They're just using stuff from, the past generation of people's like technology. And so I don't, but who they're reporting back to at this moment, they're all reporting back to the Crimson King. But I don't think any of those doors
Right?
are physically like all of them are working kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
the
we
Tahi,
learned
the Lowmen, and them, they're all reporting back to Randall, and Randall's the one reporting back to Crimson King.
King, yeah. Um. So let's move forward. I was gonna wait and see if Trev can make back to me. Um. So
rebooting.
we go to the next chapter. In the jungle, the mighty jungle. Flipping gears back to Jake and Oy as they leave Callahan and move forward into the Dixie Pig FedEx station, quickly killing the kitchen staff minus the boy cook. The boy cook gives Jake minor directions and a tip about the mine trap. Jake and Oy move forward, killing many of the king's men using the Thermopylae tactic. Continuing further, Jake walks right into the mine trap, not realizing he's triggered the trap. And for explanation, the mind trap just basically it's like a room where it summons up your deepest, darkest fear in real life. It's kind of like a computerized version of it, I'd say.
Hmm.
But Eventually, with the help of Oi, Jake sees how to beat the trap, switching minds with Oi, using Oi to manually walk Jake through the mine trap, barely escaping, and using the trap to temporarily mess with the King's men. Finally, making it to the New York FedEx door, barely makes it to the door thanks to Susanna being pulled through that like split second before being shot. Um, and a big disadvantage if you never. There's a lot in the series, a lot.
A lot.
So my question for this part, and it goes into the whole mind trap thing, but do you believe, and yes, this is a thing, but do you believe you can blank out parts of your memory, but specifically the thing that is deemed the scariest part of, like what you fear the most? Do you think you could block that out? Like Jake totally forgets this movie that scared the crap out of him as a kid, and then this thing brings out your deepest darkest fear. Do any of y'all have a situation, that has? Do you think that's a thing with? And I do know that trauma, yes, you can, that is the thing, and I mean, we can, as humans, we can be traumatized and wipe out that memory. But
Well, my
but
biggest
as far
fear
as
is
like,
drowning,
yeah, go ahead.
but I don't think I could ever block out drowning. Like it's such a I
That's like
know
me
it
with
exists.
heights. I don't know if I could block out heights. But well, like specifically, let's go into like in this scenario with a movie. Like a movie, a book, something like that. Do you think that like the movie that scared you as a kid? Because I don't know the scaries anymore. But when I was a kid, there was a couple movies that got me. But I never forgot those movies. You know what I'm saying? I remember that they scared the crap out of me, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah, I was
you
going to
see,
say the same thing. I don't think, while I think you can process things in a way to block them out if they're too painful, I don't think of that when I think in terms of forgetting scary movies or whatnot.
Yeah, I think it's going to be more of a traumatic event that might happen to you. Watching a scary movie is one thing, but having something actually happen to you in your life in
yeah,
reality
yeah,
is a different trauma that is easily knocked out of your brain and will forget. It's a mechanism of your brain
yeah.
to fix itself and to be able to move forward. Otherwise, you'll be permanently fucked,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, stuck. Yeah,
Yeah.
How Jake
yeah, but
Triceratops in his closet.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I do love the scene, and I love the like the idea of it. Like I do love that the Kingsman even has weapons like this. It just kind of adds to the whole like my love of the series. But like walking through a corridor and all of a sudden like and with all this being said, you got Oi. There's Trev. All right, Trev.
Come on, Trev.
Mm.
He's alive.
But
Yay.
The tower is back.
but with Oi in the background, and him going through the scenario, and always like, what's with Jake? I mean, we need to go that way, and he just stopped. Like that. like first and foremost, Jake.
So funny
Oi
watching
is not.
boy get used to walking in Jake's body. He couldn't hardly walk. He's just like stumbling everywhere.
when they switch when
He's
they
like,
switch
don't
minds.
crawl on all fours. Don't crawl on all fours.
Yeah, Jake has to keep reminding him, don't go back to all fours. Like, um, how I loved it. Like, and already we haven't really gone into it because it always shines on like so many different parts in the story. Like, before then, when we were back in the Dixie Pig, they had all the enemies covered except for the doctor bugs. And if it wasn't for Oi coming, like figuring out that Billy Bumpers were made to
We're
kill these
built for
things.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, like they Callahan and Jake, it might have went different if Oi wasn't there. And kind of in this scenario too, we get to the mine trap and Jake trying to figure out what's going on and being sucked into this song and movie with this terrifying. I forget what he calls the Trisana. What does he call it?
Boy proved himself as a true quartet member.
Yeah, he
Hell
had a
yeah!
name. He had a name for it. Yeah. But they were
It's like
holographic
Christina.
projectors in the wall that were projecting it in reality. So it was a combination of magic and science, which is what
But
they
It
were
was
talking
literally
about through the whole
yeah,
series.
Mm.
the
like
magical
reading.
part is that even though they were holograms, they could kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah, not
Yeah,
only,
give you a
but
heart
okay,
attack.
so it's telepathically reading someone's mind, and then it hologram projects these things to the point where it can kill you. Like he could feel the grass and smell certain things. Like no, that's some scary shit right there. And all it was just some lights. Like oh,
Yep.
it's alive.
It's
I'll,
pretty
s-
funny when the
That's
Tahim
good.
are chasing them afterwards and through that
It
part.
reminded me of what's that the holodeck in Star
Yeah.
Trek.
Yeah.
Star Trek.
That's what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
thought
yeah.
of immediately when I read that scene. I
Yeah,
went, "Holy shit, they're on the holodeck."
Yep.
yeah. It's kind of
Or
like
or
that.
the
I never
danger
thought
room,
about it.
right? In the X-Men.
Yeah, and danger.
I'll say this though, right? The battle that was right before this, where Jake just killing whoever he had to kill. Visualizing that scene as it was written, I was like, okay, this needs to be a TV series. I need to see this scene acted out. It
That
just was so wonderfully
the whole
written.
from the Dixie Pig to like this whole like I've been waiting to see this in live action form just because like it's written in that visual descriptive style where you can kind of piece it together, and it just running through all these corridors and stuff under the Dixie Pig into the FedEx station, like just
Jake,
imagining like how like the corridors work and everything has always fascinated me because they go
yeah,
there's like
Well,
so many tunnels.
think of the movie Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of I
exactly.
kind of get that vibe from it when I read that scene.
Huh.
yeah.
I kind of go with
That's a
that.
good thought.
Trev, I was asking towards that. We're in the jungle, the mighty jungle with the mine trap. Um, Jake blanks out that thing that scared him the most. He forgot this movie, and it isn't until the scenario where he remembers this movie that it scared him as a kid. Blah blah blah. Is that something that you've done or could see people doing, like forget, like, and not real life traumatic stuff? Yes, that can be, but
Yeah. I
forgetting a
mean,
movie that
I would
scared you
say it
as a
happened to
kid.
me. Yeah.
Did it?
Cujo
Mm.
scared me as a kid, and I almost completely forgot about it until I watched it again. I was like, "Oh my god!" It brought back all the memories of,
Re-traumatized.
yeah,
And then that's a
having
first. I never heard
nightmares
this.
for weeks.
Damn.
Yep, I had that with
So I guess
Paranormal
it's not.
Activity. Those ones scared the
Mm.
shit out of me.
Who did that? I like the third one.
Fuck.
They're all okay though.
Mhm.
All right, so moving gears, move over to Turtleback Lane. Roland and Eddie reuniting with John Cullum and telling John everything that started since the drawing of the three, explaining what is needed of him in New York, with Carver giving him a sigil, the cross that he has till his dying day, to start the Tech Corporation, also confirming where the walk-in door back to Midworld is, and regifting um, Roland and Eddie with their gunner, which is not brought up until now. Eddie and Roland have been, you know, running around gunlessly with, with Balazar and his men. Who knows what, driving. Oh, wait,
And what are
what
the
was it?
coincidences that happened? He just went back to the scene of the crime, and it was just sitting there, and he just grabbed it.
And
He
walked
was
Well,
like,
away.
"I'll take this."
the whole explanation, and that's how Eddie knew right away that Cullum was a part of it, because he was told to leave, and he didn't get mad like Tower and Deep know. No, because what did he go do? He went back and looked at the crime scene. He was like, "Well, I just want to sleep," and he was like, "I see this bag." He was like, "Well, I ain't gonna need this."
I'm just gonna
I,
take
lo-
this and just walk away like I own it.
Hmm. Yeah.
I actually love Cullum's part, and Cullum's part in the whole story. And during this part, we actually get bits and pieces of the future, because he tells us of things that he does in the future within the tech corporation. He talks about like they bombed like a Sombra like installation in Turkey or something like
Yeah.
that. Like he you know
Terror
he
attack.
yeah, he talks about, like, yeah, and this goes into that whole white thing and what the white was willing to do. I mean, you're talking about, like, I
Killing
mean, they
people.
they, they bombed the building that had bad people in it, but that isn't that like the Death Star scenario where, like, yeah, the Death Star
Were they
was
all
like,
bad?
I mean, were
Hmm.
the bathroom cleaners bad? Were the
The janitors,
Hey,
construction people, administration staff, the HR department.
okay, so we move on to reunion. Driving back on Turtleback Lane, they find the doorway. Roland and Eddie kill the guards of that door. Opening the door on the New York side and seeing Susanna, Jake, and Oi on the other side, they are reunited finally. The Kata is whole again and stronger. Um, Not really any questions in here, but that's exactly what happens. I love that he spends time with the guards before the door, like it was so important. Yeah, go ahead, Trey.
I was going to say, whenever I disconnected, you were talking about the other doors that went back to like all
Oh yeah, yeah.
uh, the catastrophes and stuff. I was thinking, honestly, they were there by the people that built them. They're being used right now as almost recreation, but I think they were put there as almost like a lesson.
I
Oh
Like,
always
yeah.
had like I
yeah,
always had ideas that they were like used as, like, because I kind of said military advantage, but teaching tools. Like,
Teaching.
hey,
Yeah.
this is
yeah.
what not to do, kind of thing.
Or this
I
is
could.
what to do. This
Oh
is
yeah,
how
that
you
too.
approach it.
Yeah,
This is
like
how
I
you
could,
this is how you assassinate somebody, or this is how you blow up a building.
or prevent a disaster, or like I'm
Because
a
remember,
lot of
we're dealing with the red
scenarios.
here, right? At least they're
Yeah,
Yeah,
using
yeah,
it
but
for
yeah, yeah.
sure.
but it wasn't put there by the particularly by the
No, it was
red.
the old ones. Yeah, and what were the
Yeah.
old ones using it for, kind of thing. And in
Tourist
that,
attraction.
okay, and in the background, yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be a huge hub, like a train station, like in that was used to connect to, like, all worlds was the FedEx station, because it was the biggest Dogan out of the mall or whatever. I don't know. Gets you thinking, like, was it a bad thing that they were? I mean, of course, currently what they're using it for, the king, he owns all that,
Hmm.
but previously what the old ones were using it for, and I have to imagine it was something like that. They were like, because their whole what we know about them is they were trying to mix magic. They were trying to replace the magic that was leaving the world, and they were trying to do technology, and stuff like that to keep tower going, kind of thing.
Yeah, I like your thought about it being a history lesson, though. So it's live history, though.
Yeah, I kind of like that. And I mean, we kind of do that already with, simulation, sim type of stuff. We also, I mean, that's kind of already a thing. Like you could go that far in like history video games and stuff like that, and basically war scenarios, and all kind. I don't know. Um, so we move on to the book, Part Two, Blue Haven Devar-Toi. The Tet now together rest and palavering, catching up all the corners of their story up until the point where they all got disconnected. Meeting Nigel and now pinpointing the path of the quest. Breakers, then Castle Discordia, then the Tower. Roland also learning of Mordred. Um, Nothing, no questions really here. It's just kind of moving the story along. Even the catching up between the characters is kind of like a background thing. It just kind of happens really quick. Um, the next chapter is The Watcher. After receiving food from Nigel and seeing some odd evidence with Nigel's hands, Susanna has a premonition of Nigel helping Mordred and Mordred watching them currently. We flipped Mordred and Nigel bringing him a baby Billy Bumbler to eat and drain dead. We learned that Mordred is a strong technopath, telepath, were spider. Due to his were part, he needs massive amounts of life force to keep the form current. Currently is physically too weak to try to kill the quartet. Um, for the new readers, how do you deal with Mordred? What do you think about the Little Red Prince? Were you expecting him to be half a baby, half a spider?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, that whole transformation, just the way it was written, was downright frightening.
Yeah.
It's some of the best horror parts, and all of Mordred's parts are some of the best horror parts.
Yeah, and I mean, King really wrote him well, because there are parts when he's narrating, when you're hearing his perspective, that you're like, oh, he doesn't really sound evil, and then he just throws something just atrocious in there.
Yeah.
Right after that, it's like, oh yeah, he's a bad dude.
I like that he's a self-aware in a baby's body. Basically, he's just trapped
from the
he's
get go, right?
trapped
From
in
the
that
get-go.
body, but he's a lot more aware.
Let me ask you, in terms of Mordred, I know that we were talking about, I had brought up The Outsider a couple sessions ago. Was that Dean Koontz or was that Stephen King?
No, that's Stephen King, and
That is Stephen
technically
King?
that is Tower related. Like
Yeah, because I was going to say, I haven't read the book. I saw the HBO series, and it sounds like this Mordred is very similar to that, whatever the creature was.
Very similar. It's where Pennywise feeds off of your fear. The Outsider, he fed off of torment, or off of the sadness around.
And also the library policeman, she feeds off of like emotions and fear and stuff like that as well.
Different forms of vampires.
Exactly. And that is exactly what this little boy is, because that's exactly what he wants, is basically just blood, and lots of blood, and to the point where he doesn't even know. I mean, if he's sucking these things dry, that means he's 98% water too, kind of thing.
Sucked the spinal cord where it cracked because he sucked the marrow out of it so hard.
So I just thought of a question for everybody here. So there is some confusion when it comes to Mordred, and from the enemy side, and we see this multiple times during our story when it comes to Mordred, like during the pregnancy, even to the point where they thought like it was going to be a baby, but we know that the Crimson King knew that Mordred was going to be just like this. Why have his men like get ready for this regular baby that wasn't a regular baby? You know what I'm saying? Like, why have your man that's supposed to complete this mission and give them like horrible information about the prophecy and
Yeah, they were just sacrificial pawns.
Exactly.
Crimson King.
As we see, Mordred can handle himself. He's just driven by hate to the extent where, as long as he's got the food and the energy, he'll keep moving. He'll do what he has to do.
And he's driven by hunger.
So Sayer and all them in that room, they were basically just sacrifice tools. Like, the king knew that Mordred was going to be like that, and he was like, "Yep, all you were supposed to be right there to die."
Yep. Also serve the
He had
king.
to had the baby like a normal birth.
Needed the food.
We know the king is a junkie for the tower too. He doesn't give a shit about anybody or anything.
Yeah,
Those
Randall-
are tools to him.
his addiction's on a whole nother level.
I mean,
So
he really doesn't care what happens to Mordred either. He just wants Mordred to kill Roland.
Yep.
Right?
Another tool.
Yeah.
All to bring the tower down.
yeah, basically, and that even the way the prophecy talks about Mordred is in a tool fashion.
Yeah. How fast Mordred was adapting and learning and everything going on. Like, Mordred he's figuring stuff out so fast. He's a huge threat.
An hour into it, he's already at like, I think, a 6-month baby, and then like
His own mother.
And less than like an hour after that, he's already at like a toddler like build, but mind wise, he's already at like a 20-year-old, like, thoughts and stuff like that. I mean, instantly as a baby, he already had like kind of adult thinking kind of thing. It's more like a primordial adult thinking kind of thing.
Genetic memory.
He's programmed.
That's one of the
over.
coolest things about vampires, though. They drink your blood, they get your memories.
It said something about he had the Crimson King's memory and Roland's memory.
Yep.
Yeah, embedded in
All that knowledge to start with in that little tiny brain.
So moving along, The Shining Wire. I love that. Probably one of my favorite chapters in the whole story. But
now, what was the wire coming out of his mouth? What did they mean by that? It was just like a glowing wire coming from his mouth.
That was on that. Like, I know Trev's seen Demon Slayer. Remember the spider ghouls and how they use the silk, and you couldn't exactly see it until you saw it, kind of thing. That's what that was like. I want to say it was more like a psychic silk, psychic thread kind of thing. The silver lining. So the Shining Wire, learning that Nigel has died off. We meet Mordred sleeping and is greeted by Walter / Randall / a whole bunch of crap. Appearing out of nowhere, Randall is wearing his thinking cap for protection against Mordred. But from the start, we see Mordred has no issue getting into Walter's mind without him knowing. We learn about Walter Paddock and his origins, giving info on how Walter came. He finally stops the game with Randall Flagg, realizing too late Walter Paddock dies a horrible death at the hands of Mordred. Mordred goes back to sleep. My question for this is going to be, let's see, I got 2 for this.
Give me your tongue. Give me your tongue.
Give me your eyes.
And he yanked it out like 80%. Yeah.
That was such a fitting end for that bastard.
Man, I felt sorry for him. I don't know about you.
I didn't.
No. I mean, in the scene, it was easy to sympathize with him, and like, was it an appropriate ending? I'd say yeah, but at the same time, like, did he warrant all like that ending kind of thing?
And then
so my question goes into the thinking cap. We learned it does work against in the next chapter. Actually, we learned that it did work against Jake and the Tet, and it blocked not only their minds but his mind. Walter against them. But we learned not against Mordred. Using a machine against a technopath, not the smartest things. But Walter was told it would work by the king himself. Why the deceit? Like,
it was also told or said that the Lowmen had their caps that the Lowmen were actually like Randall Flagg's hood. They were embedded with technology in their caps that kept out of their mind. I was just going to bring that up.
It is true though.
So like
Let's
they
go.
knew. But yeah, Randall Flagg was just arrogant. Thought he was actually gonna block him. He wasn't scared of him. Just came in thinking he was gonna, outsmart him. Oh, you're just a little baby. But that little baby the whole time just sitting there. I am ready to eat you, but what else do you know?
Let's go with Steve. What you got for me?
Well, as we know, the Crimson King will fuck over anybody to, he's a tower junkie too, so he needs to feed a Mordred. And now Walter has fulfilled whatever he needs to do. He's blundered every bloody assignment that he's given him, so that's it. He's done. So he tells him, "Yeah, go talk to my son. Go help him out. Everything will be fine. It'll be okay."
You think he's the sacrificial piece that's failed enough,
Yep. And it's time for him to end and to feed the Mordred. So he'll feed 100 of them to him.
I think Crimson King always knew.
Yeah.
The double cross the Crimson King, no matter.
Well, they're all double crossers of each other. Again, think about the
Crimson
it's that
King
side, yeah.
Wouldn't want Randall around as a threat, because Randall wanted to get to the top of the tower. So
you're exactly right. It's endgame now, baby. It's all for one and one for the king.
See, I don't think it's just that though, because tell me if I'm wrong. After all of this happens,
last book.
Well, after Randall is eaten, doesn't Mordred say something like he's absorbing his memories and his strength and whatnot? So I think for the Crimson King, it was a win-win in all situations. You get rid of Randall, but you also give Mordred more than enough power to get out of that spot. But he also gains
1,500 years of memory.
Yeah, the knowledge, the memories, and everything. It's like it's like a cheat code, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Incidentally, and going into that, he actually downloaded all the needed memories that he needed even before he killed him. Technically, the killing part was just fun and food kind of thing.
A Mortopedia.
Now I'm not gonna know this right now, but I don't know if he kind of basically overpowered. If King basically overpowered Mordred at this point, because I mean, if Randall Flagg is the big bad of several Stephen King books, now he's above Randall Flagg.
Yep,
Mordred is, yeah. I'd say,
yeah.
And I mean, going back from what we know,
from what we're planning, Mordred wants to take his father's spot. So Mordred wants to be Uno.
And we do know that Mordred was given a key to open the Dark Tower, and that was one of the things that Walter went there looking for, was that key, and he thought it was the birthmark on his foot until he changes into the spider and realizes it's the symbol on the spider's chest that's the key, not the birthmark. No, but Cheney's right. It's right there. I mean, for us, Walter was going to screw over Mordred. He was going to screw over the Crimson King. It was part of the plan altogether. Going into that, part of the quartet, he does have a different path than Roland, even though his path still has the same end game. But yeah,
he didn't think he was reading his mind, but he was. He kind of let a lot of it loose in his mind while he was sitting there, bowing to him and lying to him. Giving him fealty and stuff.
That was on Walter. He missed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the mind trap. He doesn't even realize he stepped into the mind trap. But the second you go into that scenario and you're in Walter's perspective throughout the whole story until Mordred starts talking to him, and you do get to see bits and pieces of what Mordred's doing inside his head. But the second he starts reflecting, that's Mordred just going through his head, because there's no reason he should be reflecting about his life. While he's talking to Mordred, all of a sudden he's just like, well, I do remember this time back in the day when I was chasing Roland, and no, it's just Spider Baby going through his memories and shit, and him not knowing that he was already being controlled.
Yeah, you made me think of something. So we're led to believe that the Crimson King knows he's old, he's dying, he's on his way out. Is the Crimson King's ultimate goal to let Mordred get to him, to actually eat him, but in a way he's kind of carrying on?
Yes, and I think that's even brought up at one point, or that's what Mordred is told or thinks, something like that, that he is supposed to replace the king. He's supposed to eat him and like basically become the Crimson King himself, kind of thing. And I think that's part of the prophecy, like, as far as why Mordred's there and what he represents to the Crimson King's goals, kind of thing.
It was a kind of a weird point I picked up. I don't remember exactly where it was, but I know they were saying, it was somewhere in there, Mordred saying that, or someone was saying, one of the Tahim, I think, that the Crimson King had lived next to the tower for so long because he had obsessed over it for so long that it trapped him. So he was trapped and imprisoned on the tower and became nothing but the glowing eyes. But it was because he lived there next to it for so long and was just obsessed with it for so long. And so I think it's like the Crimson King already knows he's going to lose. Like the Crimson King, I think, already knows he's lost, so he's trying to find another way to win. And the only other way he could win is through Mordred, his son. So like really it's him living on through his son, I think. Especially with all his memories and everything are now in Mordred. So he kind of is.
I think you're exactly right. That's his plot and plan,
I just think he wants Mordred to kill Roland before Roland reaches the tower. He wants to be able to destroy everything.
Yeah, well, that too. I mean, that this is his like ultimate death weapon, you could say. Best of both worlds. Some of Roland, some of the King. I mean, already the features that he's born with, able to transmod into Werespider, like the whole like he's a technopath, which means he can control machines. A telepath,
But
he can
be damaged by bullets.
Yeah, yes, he can.
It's
Yes,
true.
he can. But that was right after he was born, so we don't know if that. Um, maybe he was weak.
Himself that he needs to protect himself because he knows that bullets can damage him. So he knows not to take on the quartet right away. He wants to learn all he can about the quartet, watch them, see what they can do.
He's watching.
That was a weird picture with the baby up in the spider web.
I love that. That scene after he kills Walter, cool. He just spins the web and
he's all looking down at him.
Goes to sleep. So my second question: during these scenes, Nigel has all of King's non-tower related books. Roland deems them a trap. Why? I'm gonna go with Phil.
Well, I think first of all, I think Roland knows not to trust Nigel, and Susanna has that same inclination to a degree. I think Roland understands these books not just as basically as a look into other possibilities and other worlds that may or may not be theirs. So it could be a means to distract. Perhaps what's written in one of those books is not how the events of that world went. So if they get too focused on, well, hey, the book says this is going to happen next, they could kind of lose sight and screw up big time.
Trev, what do you think?
I was thinking maybe because King, at this point, he hadn't finished the Dark Tower.
No.
So maybe it was like his subconscious trying to put things into the Dark Tower universe from his other books to try to still manipulate it because he has that in the back of his mind.
I like the part where he says he tries to add dreams to his stories, like yeast to bread to make it right, make the story rise.
80 questions that multiple times. Like they bring up the whole Deus Machina thing with King. Steve, what you think?
I got nothing.
I think it was like I think it's another way to nod to his other works and tell you, like the reader, hey, that there are books that aren't connected to this story within all my books, because you do find that out. Like learning that a lot of books connect to the tower was a fascinating thing to me as a reader. Like, man, he's integrated like bits and pieces of different worlds into the series, and they do flow back and forth, like into the series and out of the series to other, stuff. Um, so I want to say it was something attributed to that. This is the second time at this point during the story, and when Roland's encountered a Stephen King book and him deeming it like a trap of the enemy, and I want to believe it's something like Roland's decision is something due to what Phil said. Him believing that it's like they would get so focused on what they read in the book, it would change quite possibly what would happen in the key world, or something like that, or affect their thinking or something like that. Yeah, the Stephen King universe. I don't know, but I will say, as a reader, and I know this was talked about before with the insert of King as a character himself, his universe inserted into the story himself. I love all that. Like finding out Nigel was literally reading like the Dead Zone, and he's reading these other, like, no, he's never heard of the Dark Tower series kind of thing. I love all those like comments within the book. Like, yeah,
Walking
I'm
that
reading.
whole wall of every one of Stephen King's books. Where was that?
I do. Wait, say it again there.
I'm trying to remember. Oh, geez, when did that happen? That was with
What
Roland
happened?
and Eddie, wasn't it? With Roland and Eddie, when they go and they go somewhere, and somebody has every single one of Stephen King's books. They see
Nigel.
all. They don't find the Dark Towers. They don't find any books about them.
Yeah, it's with Nigel in his study. They find out that Nigel has like a reading room. He doesn't have a bedroom because he's a robot. But in his reading room, he actually has all of, and at that time, it would have been like 43 other books that Nigel had, but he has every single book that's not tower related. That has no, you imagine, like, even the smaller like tower related books, like maybe The Mist or something like that. That those
But
would be
I
there.
agree with you. This was just. Usually, I don't like self insertions, but like this was just done very well. Like
Yeah,
the way Stephen
I
King
agree.
did it.
I agree. Maybe being that, for all intents and purposes, the group is in an enemy headquarters. Maybe it's basically like a form of reconnaissance from them. Like, yeah, he doesn't have a bedroom, but anybody, the lone men don't strike me as guys who like to do a lot of reading, but really anybody could go in there and read a book and get some sort of insight. At
Yeah,
the end of
actually,
the day, maybe Roland is more like, hey, if you read this, you may rely on the book too much and weaken your own kind of connection to Ka or to each other.
no, not actually. This is, you're bringing up something that I should have remembered, but no, because we do know that King's forces are trying to divert King. And we do know that. And so, what makes more sense is you having your enemies read what he's written, outside of the tower thing. I think that makes 100% sense, kind of thing.
And Jake wants to take all the books with him, and Roland's like, "No, it'll just confuse us."
Hmm.
Mm.
And Cheney brings up some, like, a good point. I love the line about the turtle when he says, like, a certain paper, that you may not know leaves the story forever. And it was a like nod to the paper boat and it, and after it left that story. And in this book alone, there's so many different, hints or just nods to his other works at this point. He's going like full blown kind of thing. Um, Kevin was saying, I love how 1023, 102263 took so many of the stories. The guy travels back in time. Christine was brand. Yeah, no, I mean that itself has a couple different tower connections. With this book alone, mentioning that book specifically. Um, all right, so moving forward, the door into Thunderclap, with Oi leading the way. Again, my boy Oi. Oi leading the way with the scent of the wolves. They press forward through the corridors under the FedEx station. They come to the Bay of the Wolves, where the wolves are repaired and maintained. The rooms of ruin, a room that Eddie saw all the way back with Shardink and his little, Shardink robots. They find the Thunderclap door that the wolves used. They walk through and suffer some of the worst nausea, learning that some of the doors was specifically made for machines to go through and not people. Um, in Thunderclap, they are greeted by three people. So my question for this little section right here, and it pertains to those three people. We meet three characters from the tower related works. Those three people are Stanley Ruiz, Ted Brannigan, and Dinky Earnshaw. Why no backstory on Dinky? And yes, we're halfway through the book, but I will tell you, you don't get Dinky's backstory. You do get Ted's. We know Shimi's. Um, why no backstory on Dinky, like where he came from, why he pertains, and he does come from another Stephen King book, just like Ted Brannigan comes from Hearts in Atlantis. Shimi coming from multiple different, parts of the Dark Tower series. Um, any thoughts on why there's no, Dinky Earnshaw origin? I'm gonna go with new reader Trev.
I got nothing on that.
Phil.
I hadn't thought about while I was reading it, but what stuck out to me at this point was that I don't understand why Roland accepted these three men so easily. I didn't read his other books, so it kind of doesn't, it didn't occur to me, hey, they might be from another story. I mean, as far as Dinky goes, again, I just kind of thought, okay, maybe, I don't know, maybe he's just not, maybe he's just going to be like basically a red coat. He's going to be a throwaway kind of character.
Yeah, at first it's like, why is Roland accepting these guys? But then you realize Roland knows it's Shimi, and that's why he's accepting. He knows it's Shimi. He knew it was Shimi when he saw him.
Yeah, right off the bat.
But even his, and Mike, tell me to stop if I'm going to get too far ahead of a question, because, Roland, I feel like, was more afraid, to be honest with you, when he met Shimi, because the Roland that knew Shimi back then is certainly not the Roland from now, and even Shimi comments on that.
I think that's why Roland doesn't approach Shimi right off the bat, because we do know that Roland recognized him right off the bat. So, and knew that it was Shimi, and from everything we knew on Roland's end, there's no ill will or nothing like that. So, like, why the hesitation to wait for the surprise for the readers kind of thing? And I think it plays into that, maybe reading the room. Roland, in the background, Roland does question the three.
Dinky did throw me off. I was just like, who is Dinky? I guess it was Stephen King wants you to read this other book that Dinky's from. I don't know.
And I don't remember the specific story, but he's from Everything's Eventual, and there's a side story that he pops up, and basically in his side story, it reminds me of a lot of Death Note. Dinky Earnshaw is a precog, so he's able to lean a little forward in the future. I mean, his whole story is about how he's being used by the Crimson King's forces, and he's using like cards to kill people with them, like psychically kind of thing. In the end, he eventually does kill his boss that he's working for in that story, and then he leaves and eventually gets caught by the low man, and that's how he ends up being a breaker. But they don't really, King does not even highlight that he's from that story, Everything's Eventually, when he highlights many times that Ted's from Hearts of Atlantis, even goes into, his little spiel.
Well, I got to know, what did Trev think of Thunderclap once they got to Thunderclap? Like, that was pretty cool, huh? Like, the visuals he gives, like,
he's great with visuals. Scenery, King is, he's great with describing things for sure.
Through one little hole, the clouds shining on it. And, I think really the movie actually nailed the way that looked, because that's in the movie. They got Thunderclap.
Yeah, they did. That was the one scene in the movie that was accurate.
It's
Yeah,
actually
they
Yeah,
did
the
a good
one
job.
scene.
Yeah, not the ones.
Well, the mansion, the house with the house demon, that was pretty cool too.
They had some scene.
I think part of them, part of Roland trusting them was also because they came through in such a vulnerable position. If they were evil, they
And
could have
even
killed them so easily.
yeah, and he kind of mentions that when like Ted's trying to get them to move and stuff, and he's like, "Oh, you got me at a disadvantage." You
Yeah.
know, that they weren't really prepared because I mean, it's stated twice in the book that they were not supposed to go through the doors, like that door, and we find out that that's why they sent the wolves through the doors because it was made specifically for machines, and what it did to people. Like, I mean, the way Roland explains it was he felt like he was broken too, and then put back together, kind of thing. It doesn't sound fun.
Mm.
Steve, you got any thoughts into the Wino
I think he's just
background?
an NPC, non-player character. That's all he
Yes,
is.
he is. He is. Um, yeah, it's just one of those questions on why. Like I was reading, you know, he goes into detail on the like bad guys and yada yada yada. But then we do meet a main character from another one of his books, and he gives no time to this guy, kind of thing. Um,
Lazy writing.
These characters did feel
maybe
a little shoehorned into the story.
Yeah, it's almost
at,
like
at,
he threw him in quick, and he's like, "Okay, I need a couple other NPCs in here. Let's throw this guy. Let's throw this guy. We're not going to give him backstories. We'll just throw him in there."
I want to say the real ideology on why Ted, Shimi, Dinky show up at this point in the story because we're not with them for long, but they are a part of the story. But okay, so it's because his other works. You know, he had Hearts of Atlantis, and this, like when you read Hearts of Atlantis, the whole book's pretty much about the Low Man and you
Yep.
know the Crimson King and this and that. Like it's basically the story that y'all heard about Callahan. It's that same story, just take out vampires and add in Low Men. You know, kind of thing. Um, but like I want to believe that was it. He wrote these couple because at the time he had done Shimi's Tale, which was a comic. He just got done doing Everything's Eventual, that book, like a
was
couple years
there doing
before
other
this.
stories that needed tied up. So like
Hmm.
these characters still had an ending coming, and so that's why they're here. Like it's not really like you're saying shoehorned. It's we're waiting for this. Like there's readers out there that read their stories and we're waiting. Where what happened to them? What the heck? Where's the
Now we
end?
know what happened to him.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I want to believe that's kind of all this was just him, like him saying that certain books were Tower related, but they didn't really have that connection. He was just like, oh, I can throw these characters in here, and now they are, you
kind
know,
of convenient.
they.
I guess we could try to say like the white maybe was putting in some factors into Ka, like helping Sheeny help Roland on his path, and they're connected. So Sheeny always knew Roland was still alive, and Roland always knew Sheeny was still alive, and so they connected later down the road. They knew they would.
Yeah, and Ted tells us that Shimi knew, not just knew that Roland was out there. It actually touched his mind a bunch. Like, had been following some of his journey, kind of thing. You know, like physically knew that he was alive. To
How
the
is
point
Sheeny
that's
1,500 years old?
magic, baby, magic. That is something
So,
that's never really explained.
Got that elven blood in them.
Not so much. What's up, Steve?
What's up,
and the
Steve?
place they
Um,
are moving really fast, even though they're not aging any faster. Like they're standing still, their time's still moving.
there is an explanation I could give you to Shimi, but you have to wait until the end of the story, and then I can explain my theory on Shimi and age. And but let's just say magic for now. And we do know that he is a like two of them are very strong magical entities, like Ted being this EMP booster, and Shimi
She's a
being a
teleporter.
teleport. And teleport's like one of the only mortal sins that the red side has, kind of thing. Um, oh, and I agree. I love that show. 10/22/63. I thought it was great. Um, so we're moving forward. We'll move to chapter 5 with I'm probably going to say this wrong. Skeet TT. Meeting Ted Bradigan, Stanley Brewis, and Dinky Earnshaw, they have to move fast through the train station or be caught. Eventually making outside, they are teleported about 20 miles to a cave very close to the breaker prison Blue Haven. Given a brief rundown on Thunderclap, the 100 Acres of Light, being told they need to wait a day, but with a cave full of weapons, food, transportation, and tapes to go through. Roland asks for a child of Roderick. Roland reveals Stanley to be Shimi. I think that's all I have for that. Okay.
Audiobook announced it two different ways too. They said TT and then they said K.
Tetang, yeah.
Mhm.
Like,
Maybe
I want to say it's TT,
silent.
but
I like
I don't
TD
know.
better.
Yeah, I like TT. And then it kind of go well, like a lot of the Dan, Ted, and Dan TT. I mean, he's got
Audiobook
so many.
is really weird. I noticed, like through different chapters, you could tell he stopped and took a break and came back because like the sound would change, like his pitch would just be a little bit different, and then in the next
Yeah, I caught
chapter,
that too.
Yeah, I caught that.
it'd be a little bit different. It was weird.
I think maybe just due to the pre-recording of segments, kind of thing. I always thought, I don't know.
He was just
When
getting a little bit off on the accent of some of the voices, like where he would come up because there were so many characters in this
Yeah,
that he was he was getting off a little bit, like where he would come up with this accent for one character and another character. Some of the accents were like bleeding through each other.
they were. But specifically, like, there's a moment when they're Roland and Eddie are approaching the door, and like he was reading the different characters were there, and then he used the same voice for like three of the different bad guys. And I want to say it's just like he just had bad guy voice in his head, but I mean,
Yeah,
because he does go through like tons of different voices from like female to the kids to um no, but it is noticeable. There's I want to say like at least for me in this reading, there's like 3 or 4 times where a couple of the voices just merged into the same voice kind of thing. There wasn't the separation unless you like you had to pay attention to which character was speaking kind of thing. Luckily, it didn't happen too much.
but it kind of helps sometimes because like this is the first time I heard it in audio. I've only ever read this before, and listening to it in audio, and I was like, it was actually kind of helping in some parts because when I was reading it, like I wasn't getting the voices right myself, and it was kind of
It's hard. Like
confusing.
what does
It
a
was like I
tahine
was getting
sound like?
lost
You know?
on who was
Yeah.
saying what, and he kind of would just help me keep track of who was saying what. Is this Tahine right now, or is this one of the breakers? I can't tell.
Yeah, Frank Mueller.
He died, I think.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Um, he was a big part of the series. You know, he read most of the whole series up into the last couple. Incidentally, his whole like death is added into the whole mystery of the 99 kind of thing. So okay, moving on. Master Chapter 6, Master of the Blue Haven. We jump to Pimley Prentice and Finley Otego, the Tahine member, and we learn quite a bit about Blue Haven. Diving into Pimley, being super religious and knowing what's coming, also explaining security issues and decay at the prison. Compliance comes up a lot, and that's going to lead into my question. King uses compliance to explain the bad guy's plot in the end game. He also uses the compliance thing to explain the breakers and why the breakers are just breaking the beams, knowing that that's the end of everything, kind of thing. He uses Jim Jones a lot to explain this ideology of compliance from both the good side and the bad. Why Jim Jones? Like, I know he was huge in history, and most everybody on the U.S. side, I think, knows about Jim Jones and what he did, kind of thing. But like, why this to explain compliance? Like, and not once, he had multiple occasions that he used the Jim Jones thing for that I can remember. Like, he could have used, 3 other, compliance explanations. Why Jim Jones? I'm gonna go with Steve first.
Shit. I don't know. I don't know why the hell did he use them.
Trev?
I'm blanked on Jim Jones.
So Jim Jones was like not, don't quote me verbatim, but was like a preacher type of character in real life, and he had a compound out in Africa, and he had
Oh yeah.
followers.
Now I
Okay,
remember.
yeah,
Yeah.
cult leader.
That's right.
It was a
Like
cult kind of
Waco.
situation. Yeah,
Yeah, like
with
a Waco
Koresh.
deal.
I mean, that's a good example right there. He could have used Koresh as
Yeah, I
one of
know.
those.
Easily used that one. Why specifically that guy?
Maybe he's
Um,
using an analogy to explain the Crimson King going mad. How Jim Jones has just went mad, made everybody kill themselves.
mhm.
Like he's just saying the king's mad. He doesn't care if everything, all reality crumbles. Don't drink the Kool-Aid.
I think,
Yeah,
I think Random Rips just nailed it. I think it's kind of they're using it like as a cautionary tale, maybe even a hint, not so much to Roland but to the rest of the con, because I mean, look, in my mind, there's going to be a point where Roland is like, "Screw you guys, this is for the tower," and I think that this is almost like a warning, kind of like, yeah, he's your din, but just know that at some point your din might do something that shouldn't be done.
So I'm glad you said all this, Phil, because this goes into the second
Yeah.
part of my question. Is the compliancy not explaining the things that are visually in front of us like it's supposed to be read, but is it the compliance of the Tet towards the tower? I mean, at this point, and we even just said this about this chapter, meeting Brannigan, Chimi, and there's a trust that doesn't even come up. Like it is stated with Roland, briefly about like, oh, why should we trust these people? But it's quickly forgotten kind of thing, and we want to deem it to being Chimi. But there's a bunch of occasions like this that you could say like, why was Roland so trusting, or why was this person so trusting, kind of thing. Could it be compliancy explaining in that direction?
I mean, I think it's compliance all around, because in my book, Roland is kind of like on an equal level of the Crimson King, where no matter what, each guy is going to do what they have to do to accomplish their end game. So, on one level, it's compliance about the rules of Blue Haven. I'll be honest with you, the title threw me off because every time they said it, I kept thinking of My Blue Heaven.
The T-shirt.
Yeah.
It's Haven, not Heaven. Haven.
That's why.
Blue Haven.
See, it was a letter off. And I was a letter off and I listened to it. I didn't read it. Go figure.
But technically, they do say Blue Heaven during the... It's like it is used as like a rip towards the name of the place,
Yeah.
So you're not that far off.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's just a cautionary tale to all who aren't Din, whether it be Roland, whether it be the Crimson King, or the other forces at work that we have not met.
Anybody want to add into that secondary question? Trev, Steve, Darren? Compliancy of the Kata?
I think the fact too that they all have that kind of psychic energy, and they can recognize when somebody has like energy. So when they were with that bit of trust there, they felt immediately that those three people had the same kind of energy that their Tet has. They're not the enemy. It's kind of like when you meet other comic book people, you can strike off and kind of get a vibe on somebody and become friends like immediately and go, okay, this guy's a cool guy. He's just like me. That energy just clicks immediately.
I can go with that too.
That, and I think, that they just have a plan set, and they're set into their plan. And so they're going to continue with their plan in any way they can. And they really, at the point where they're at, they have no choice. It's kind of like, that's one thing that the three brought up to them, was that you don't have a choice. You have to trust us. It's that or you die, basically. Or, like, you can trust us or not. We'll leave it up to you. Like, you know, I forgot the three names. Sheeny, the other three.
Ted
They were
and
telling
Dinky.
Ted and Dinky.
Ted and Dinky, they told the quartet, you know, you have no choice. So the quartet was sitting there, you know, should we trust them? Should we do this? We have no choice. And we have to do this. We have a plan. This is our path. Cause got us on the path, so we have to do it. It's almost like Ka forced them.
Do we find out if Stephen King's the one that sends those three?
I'm gonna say yes and no because he's the writer, right? But the tower, technically, right?
Yeah, he's writing
Incidentally,
what he
right?
sees.
Incidentally, we do find out that there's hundreds of breakers, right? Hundreds of breakers at this compound, right? And these are
300.
the only three that start questioning, and they just happen to be the three that are like known King characters, kind of thing. Just
They
saying.
had brought thousands of breakers there through time, but there was only 307 there at the time they were
Yeah.
there.
At least in this compound that we know of.
What's up,
Right.
Justin?
How many compounds of breakers are there?
There were other
That's
compounds.
another question. Yeah, because we do know that there are other compounds. This is just the biggest one. Like,
Six compounds?
yeah, 6. Yeah.
There'd be one on
for
every
each of the
beam, right?
beam.
So they'd be
Yep.
all the way around.
There we
this,
go.
The wheel.
Yeah.
And the ones that have completed their job, what do they do with them? Do they just like terminate everybody? Okay, you guys are done. Good job. Go back to your worlds.
For sure.
Selective,
For sure.
you know, and they just go through and select the ones that won, move them to the
new camp.
Devar-Toi.
Those ones that are powerful.
I
All
just
the
thought of
most
an idea.
powerful breakers, I think, were there at that one. Like, every beam had it the most important. So, like, they were saying, like, the turtle and the bear beam was the most important because it was the one most connected.
It was the one giving him the most trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And
because it's the one that they're on,
like,
right?
With the breakers, they would shuffle the breakers around. So, like, there's probably one compound that has the weakest breakers, one compound a little bit stronger breakers, and then the compound they're at now has the most powerful breakers they have.
It's also the beam that has our hero. It's also the beam that has our maker. It's also the beam that's why it's the hardest to take down. It's key world beam. All right, so let's move forward. We got 7. We got Kasume, and I love this term and this back in the cave, the quartet suddenly feel a wave of melancholy. Searching the cave, finding all the weapons and food, etc. Eddie finds a trick for Susanna, and a card falls. Roland knows in this moment for Kasume, enemy death that requires an equal. Balance the scales, hinting that a death in the group is coming. They hear hints of Mordred following them. They share Kef, start to listen to Ted's tapes. We jump to Mordred and see he is very close. Mordred explains his plan and his plot. And no real questions here. It's just basically like them.
Audiobook says Kashun.
Yeah.
Kashun.
It's creepy when Mordred says it. Mordred is
Kashun.
Gesundheit. Bless you.
There could have been a question to costume, but I think it's very self-explanatory, and we go into the yin and yang. Since Walter died, go ahead, Aaron.
King is so bad about spoiling what's going to happen ahead of time. But he's building this up. He's really building this up, and like he's preparing you, like get ready to have your heart broke because like. Roland sits around with everybody at the campfire, you know, okay, I need to tell all of you I love you to your face and kiss all of you for the last time. This might be the last time one of us sees each other. It's like we just know the quartet's about to break.
And he doesn't outright say that either. And he doesn't give any hint, even though they ask him a couple times, because there's one moment where he shows it on his face and he literally has to look down at the ground to hide that he knows that one of them is going to die. It's heavily hinted at multiple characters and one in particular throughout the coming chapters. Before we stop our reading, it will be a question I'll ask at the end of this between
Jake
Trev
keeps
and
bloody boy. What was with that? Like
oh,
that
we'll
was
get there. We'll get there.
okay.
Um, Now we can move forward right now. So notes from the gingerbread house. The Ted listened to the Ted tapes, taped within the gingerbread house that exists outside of space and time due to Shimi's powers, explaining Dinky is a precog, Shimi is a teleporter, and Ted is a telepath. We hear Ted's stories going shortly into getting caught and breaking, revealing that Ted is not only a telepath but a booster among other telepaths. Um, they're using a magic door created by Shimi. Tez tries to find Roland, is caught again, and I think that's basically it. I'll move forward. And oh no, there's no. I'm sorry. It says he's caught again, and then learning a little more about the Whites envoy, Psy King, which that's what he's been deemed at this point, and the Crimson King attempts at trying to silence his song of White. Hearing of the 19 Ka and the 99 Ka, learning of Suzanne's visions of the famous deaths, using the clues, they piece together the date June 19th, 1999, the day Stephen King is said to be killed. Now the path divided, save the beams or save the writer. Jake demands they ask Shimi which path to choose, and that's kind of where we leave off there. In this part, we hear of both the Ka, the mid world having being the 19 Ka, and the key world 99, being of that Ka. Um, it kind of goes more into like King's, the Crimson King's attempts at trying to sever King's actual ties to the book, and it's kind of more of just an explanation on why King took so long to finish the series, basically. um it's just like a loose explanation. Well, the Crimson King was the reason I took so long on writing this. It's basically given like a fanciful idea to to
And I
why it took him so long.
I really like the pace, and everything of this book, but at the same time, you could kind of see like it was rushed.
Yeah.
Like I feel like it was rushed. Like he wanted to finish it, get it done, and so like he's trying to rush things and tie things up fast and not leave a lot of loose ends. Like he's tying things up now, and I feel like a lot of this could have been spread out through six other books. Like this could have, like just this section we read, this first little half, it could have been six other books. It probably would have been. Like we'd probably still be waiting for the end of the story if Stephen King kept on at his
This is
pace.
definitely a story that you could have spanned out forever, especially with like the loose explanation on things. I mean, we could have kept. So I'm kind of glad we did get an ending to the series. It might have not been the ending that everybody wanted, and I will agree that there are parts that feel very rushed, but for the most part,
But
I want to say a lot of it's like really flushed out kind of thing.
And this is why they did the comic books too, right? So they got the comic
Yeah,
books right here, and this
yeah.
fills in all the gaps.
It's
yeah,
like Jericho Hill. We get more of Jericho Hill from this tale, but not all of it.
I
Even
love
with Walter, we get a little more from Walter during that part.
even with
Yeah.
filling in the gaps with just the visual too. Like there's maps inside those comics that it shows you,
Hmm.
maps of the lands where you can really visualize like how far they were traveling, where Roland Gilead was in comparison to all the other places.
Hmm.
It's really cool. And then the way Jay Lee visualized that world, I think that is a
I love it.
very, very good visualization of how Stephen King writes.
So Aaron, Trev, and Phil, how many books are behind me on the wall? Don't even think about it. What's the number?
19.
That's
Yeah,
it.
one from each of the
19.
series.
There
19.
you go.
All right, moving along. We're almost done. The tracks on the path. Dad and son go out and share a cigarette. Talk about Roland and King's connections, health wise. Specifically stating Roland's connections to King, and he's suffering the same afflictions that King is suffering at the car accident. Uh, Learn that Roland is mad at King for not finishing the series and thoughts of Kashun. Jake learns of Mordred stalking them and that he only means to watch currently. Jake is told not to tell Susanna due to her being distracted for the upcoming battles. The rest wake, they start to hear breakfast, and Shimi and Ted and Dinky teleport in with a child of Roderick. Shimi starts to convulse. Um, no questions really related to this, but there is a lot in this segment, especially because this is kind of the defining moment with Jake, deeming Roland as his father, actually calling him his father. That's hence the whole dad and son share a cigarette scene. Also in this moment, it's also Mordred confirming that he deems Roland his dad, kind of thing. Kind of a weird yin yang type of scene. Um,
Yeah.
I think it's cool
but we,
that Mordred thinks to himself, well, maybe if I just go down there and they accept me, I can just be part of their tet. You know, he like daydreams about being part of them and everything. That was
well,
pretty cool.
haha. Yeah, I do have a question that goes based on that right there. In this segment, we hear Susanna talk about using non, like, what is it? Non-violent tactics as far as what she was taught in her, in her rebel days, kind of thing. Would a non-violent reaction would have worked towards Mordred, especially after like hearing what Mordred thought, and you know, like if Mordred would have walked over to the Tet and not been violent and mean and stuff, would they have accepted him and walked him to the tower, kind of thing? Did
I
anybody
think
believe that in the group?
no. I think no matter what, even if he wanted to, Mordred would never be
They
that.
would see the mark on his ankle and be like, "No, you're with the
Yeah.
red."
Well, even if they wanted to, here's the thing though. Even if they wanted to accept him, I think it's just so ingrained into Mordred that it's just his nature. Like he's the scorpion and everybody else is the frog.
Well, it is odd here when Roland says, when Nate knows that he's been watching, and Roland says, or Jake says, Do we kill it?" And Roland says, "No, he isn't interfering with us. He's just watching."
Yeah, that
And
I
we
thought
hear
was strange.
and we hear from Mordred himself why he's watching. It's because at this point, what he knows from both dads, the Crimson King and Roland, what he's been told, his objective kind of thing, it's not lining up with everything that he has been told. So at this point, he is kind of watching and waiting, even to the point where he's going to let Roland kill the Crimson King, and he's still undetermined what he's going to do with the quartet at that time. Like he kind of believes that he might not kill him based on their actions, kind of thing. We don't really like the end game before with Mordred. Kind of seemed like, yep, he wants the tower, he wants to kill Roland and the Crimson King, he wants to be the top dog. During this occasion, we kind of find out it's a little more like in depth when it comes to Mordred, that he's not necessarily just so bent on power. He does want the Crimson King to die, but that's more of like he's kind of already dying. He is his replacement kind of thing. But as far as the Tet and their end game is concerned, he's not necessarily like 100% an enemy kind of thing. He's just watching and waiting to see what they do kind of thing. And I think if like when they get to the tower and he's watching and he doesn't that it doesn't line up with what Mordred comes across, then he's like, then I will kill him kind of thing. Um, but it is kind of like a weird like part to put that in, like after like Jake comes out and tells Roland he loves him, and then we hear this whole part with Mordred and he's like, but I could just go over to the tent right now and they would probably accept me kind of thing.
That's his
And I
fantasy
think
in his head, but yeah, they couldn't
I mean,
Mordred,
trust him,
like,
right? And we don't know if the king has control of Mordred
right? I think
telepathically, right?
That's true too.
that's what makes Mordred more of a threat, is because the quartet had the goal of getting to the tower, and Roland wants to get to the tower, and the Crimson King wants the tower, and so they all just want the tower. Where
Yeah.
Mordred is more about, I just want to survive. I'm just hungry. I want to eat. I want to survive. And so like his goal is not really the tower, but I don't know. Like that's where I think he's just sitting and watching and learning.
I
But I
will
guess
agree. He's like that
with all
wild card. You don't know.
maybe does maybe he does want the power with the genetic memory. Deep down, he just doesn't realize.
Well, he's still a
Maybe
I think,
baby.
yeah, and I think it plays into that too. He is still a baby, or at this time, he's getting more like closer to an adolescence in the baby body, but kind of like the thinking wise, like, and I think that's progressing as he's growing, kind of thing, and
Yeah,
that's starting to show, kind of thing.
that inherent built-in need for having a parent or need for having people around him, and he's jealous of that too. And they talk about that.
Yeah. So we get to the very last chapter of our reading segment, the last palavern, Shimi's dreams. Um, they calm Shimi's spasm, and Shimi awakes. They continue breakfast. Eddie and Dinky step aside and have a brief chat, learning Shimi is becoming progressively sicker when using teleportation, possibly only able to teleport 3 or 4 times. Roland speaks to Jaime's, the child of Roderick. Shimi tales of his dream of a hurt boy that comes to him and questions why he is hurting and killing him. The whole entire group has the same dream to some degree. They ask Roland about his dream, and Susanna figures out that the hurt boy is actually the dream talking to them in dream form. Susanna decides that the being, the tower in the cave, um, will Shimi decides the path, the beam, the tower. Um, in the cave, they all discuss a plan to take on Algul Siento, Blue Haven. Surprise, ambush, assault is the way to go. 6 versus 60, and that's where we leave our tail off. Um, there's a lot that actually goes into this little segment. The whole dream scenario with all of them having the same dream, them not knowing what direction to pick, whether the rider or freeing the break, or at this point not really freeing the breakers, right? Because that comes up in different motifs, during the book, whether they're going to save the breakers or outright kill the breakers, to the point where they even mention this to Ted, Dinky, and Chimi, that it might be a possibility that if the breakers are so compliant with breaking the beam, then they will have to kill the breakers, kind of thing.
yeah,
But
Roland
we
has to. He will.
Mhm. I mean, and this has already been said with the other gunslingers as well. If this comes up, it will have to be done, kind of thing. But we do know that this is main end goal type of thing.
They want to
That
say.
not only yeah, that not only that they want to save it, but the beam is demanding that they save. That they stop them from breaking this beam, kind of thing. To the point where, what does that say about that? Shimi is the one that remembers the dream, doesn't know what the dream is about. As he's explaining that he had the dream, they start remembering that they all had the same dream to some degree. Really was the boy in a
Once you start
personal setting of
talking,
their
they
choosing.
start crying because they all had the same feelings throughout the dream. The sadness,
Mhm.
how the made them sad seeing seeing the boy.
Well, what's his
Subliminal,
name?
right?
What
Subconscious.
is it? A vision of Jake in the future or something? Is that why they got
No,
all sad? It's
no,
just
and
a
that's
boy.
the way it's okay. You could take it in a lot of different ways. You could take this as major foreshadowing, because costume has been a major thing, and we do know that one of
That's
the
that
Ted
was
is going to die, and um, but it's kind of more like, I mean, you think, why did the beam choose a boy? Like, why, and especially choose the same form for each individual? I mean, they all had the same dream, including Dinky and Ted. And, um, why the boy? Why all the same? Kind of like back to the Jim Jones thing. Why the same example for all characters? Even at this point, would all of them? And I always find it odd that Suzanne is the one that realizes that it's the beam talking to them, because all the rest of them, except maybe Roland, I think Roland knew what it was, kind of thing, the second Shimi starts telling the tale. But I find it odd that the beam used the same example to tell all of them. Like, he could have came to him as a turtle, or could have came to him as the rose. Any
No,
thoughts
it's
on that?
It's to elicit sympathy. It's very simple,
Mm-hmm.
I like
right?
that.
You see a hurt child and you want to help the hurt child. So it's subconscious to help
He
them
had to
stop
make
the
all
breakers.
the beam had to make it all the same image for all of them, so that they would all know it was a message.
Exactly, that too.
Any thoughts on why most of them forgot besides Roland and Shimi?
Yeah, that
If it was that,
subliminalism.
if it was that important, I mean, we're talking
Because
about the beam
Tom
directly talking to
knew
them.
that Roland was gonna put the decision on Sheeny, and so that's where it just became important for them to know it first, or to bring it up first, because they were the ones that were going to decide what they're going to do next.
Contingencies.
Agreed. I can go with that. Contingencies. So this is the end of our reading segment, and then the last part of this is prediction for my new guys. Trev he couldn't help himself, and he has read a little further, so
He knows
he
what
kind
happened.
of he kind of knows the you know a death that's coming. But so Phil, let's talk about the costume. There has to be an equal levy death to equal Walter. Who do you think that death?
And we got to remember, it's book one. They drew the card of death.
Yeah, I don't
So
remember back to that. I mean, my thought before you just said all that was Oid, only because I remember reading back when I thought Roland thought he saw Oid's death in a prophecy or something. But
Jake
that
did. Remember Jake? Jake has
Jake's
seen
being
with the
that
truck, with him getting hit by the truck.
being that you said it's got to be equal to Walter. I mean,
Because that's what costume. Okay, technically, costume is not just a death for a death. That's not what that means. No, a
right? It's a
costume.
power. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a powerful entity on the red side died, so a powerful entity on the white side needs to, and that's what costume is.
I mean, the only equal I could think of to Walter is Roland himself.
Let's just say
That will be the Crimson.
it surprised me. I thought it was going to be somebody else.
I mean,
Well, the death that you have gotten to see not necessarily is the costume death.
the costume hasn't happened yet.
Nope.
Mm.
yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
The
even
it's
death
Trev
not
that
like
hasn't seen it yet.
the death that you know of
Okay,
it
well that
has
makes sense then, because that's what I was thinking.
it's
Why
just
they
not the
no, because
costume.
the moment
the death that
they
you witnessed, Trev, is actually one of fans' most hated points in the story because there's not a lot of meaning that goes into the
Yeah,
Yeah,
death.
it
that
was
kind of
almost
makes it
pointless.
purposeless. Yeah.
There
If,
is,
if
and
it's not
we'll
the
get there.
costume,
Yeah.
then it's Stephen King.
Oh, you mean flesh?
Ooh. Could that be a possibility that Fred King dies in our story?
Stay tuned to find out.
Well, aren't they
So
going? They're going back in time, or they're going back to try to save him because he did die in that in
not back
the
in
time
time. It just like she had a
where
revelation of
they're
the
at.
Yeah.
future, and
Right. He heard.
There's
they're
still
actually
there's still time to save him.
they're actually before time. It's not there yet. They still have like I think a couple weeks before they have that day comes up.
On Keystone Earth, where
Right.
time only goes in one
June
direction.
19th.
It was
So
the
we got
Keystone
like
Massacre and the
340 some pages left, guys. What do y'all
Hmm.
think's gonna happen? We do know that we're about to either try to free or save the breakers after that. So that the path that Roland told us was the breakers, the rider, and then the tower. What do y'all think's gonna happen?
movie got it wrong. But don't guess what the movie said.
I didn't
They
see the
haven't
movie
seen
either,
it.
so that's
Yeah,
good.
they haven't.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Don't.
Yeah,
Don't watch it.
I think that they're going to fail on all three. 0 for 3.
You think they're going to fail at all three? You think they're going to fail at freeing or killing the breakers?
Hmm.
You think the tower is going to fall?
Yes.
Mm. And that okay, so to give relevance to that, we actually get background from a couple perspectives on what would happen if that came to be, right? Because Pimley talks about it, knows that the nothing, and believes that there's a heaven beyond the nothing. Believes there's time to repent after the tower's fallen.
Yeah, what if the
We
tower
actually,
is supposed to fall?
mm, what if it's foretold, non-preventable point in time?
Yeah,
The tower.
the reset point.
Y'all think everybody's making it? And, I always, for some reason, use the first one that comes up with fan, like the first one they think is gonna die. Um, I think it's amazing that that King has not killed them off,
Hmm.
up to this point. And
I'm kind
and
of pissed that people aren't dying. I mean, death gives so much weight to a story, and
we're not
as
reading
a
J.R.R.
7 book
Martin.
story, not having any of the main characters killed is kind of disappointing for me.
Mm,
You know what, though,
well,
Trev, thinking about this too, like this book is tonally different than the others. Maybe not the book prior to this. I think
And you have to
because it's
remember, Roland lost a whole cassette already once. So before
That's
getting
true,
this,
but that's before. That's in the past.
yeah, and
but
they're not characters we spent time with either.
I think it's a good. I think it's because up until the book before this one, I don't think King thought about ending it. I think he was like, yeah, I'm just going to do this whenever I want to. In fact, I would argue that he
Yeah.
probably didn't want to come to this ending, and maybe it had something to do with the Hollywood deal. You know,
I don't know
and
if
well,
I don't know if a
tell you,
Hollywood deal, but he
I'll tell
stresses
you
that.
what did happen is that there was this old woman that was on her deathbed,
Yeah,
and
I
she
want to say
wrote,
the guilt.
yeah, I remember him saying that. Yeah,
I
I
want to
want to
know
say
the
the
end.
guilt of the fan because it wasn't just her. I want to say
She
he got thousands of letters like
died.
that.
She died before he was able to tell her the ending, and so he felt bad about her passing away before ending it. So he was like, "I'm gonna make sure I get it finished."
I want to say that's 100 because I want to believe it was like Phil. Like, I mean, like going back to let's say the first three books and my idea of what the end game looked like. This is not it. It's not that I don't like that, but that's not what I kind of imagined as far as like even the plot of it going, kind of thing. And I want to say it's 100% right. At this point, he was like, worried about his own life, especially when like stopping those kind of addictions like cocaine, alcohol, that kind of stuff. Your end comes up a lot, kind of thing. So I think that played a part to it. The guilt from the fans and the series, I think that plays a part of it. This being his Star Wars saga or his Lords of the Rings kind of thing. Can't really
See,
have that if it doesn't have an
well,
ending kind of thing.
I forgot what they call it, but it's coming up in the story. Like we're about to get to it. We haven't got to it yet, but we're about to get to it. But Stephen King is going to break into the story and talk. It's like a, what do you call it? Epilogue. I don't know what you would
Oh
Yeah.
call it.
yeah. Yeah. Like a
Monologue. It
voiceover.
will go off into a monologue and explain why the ending's wrapping up like it's ending.
Yeah. And I want to
Is that
say
that
like,
part you were talking about not to read past?
Yeah, he gives you a warning.
okay, we'll see.
That's in it.
That's the very last thing I need to explain because this series does have two endings, not
Mhm.
necessarily different endings. It just has two endings. It has a part in the story where it ends, and you as the reader are given the choice to stop reading or
Or
continue on to the second read. The I would say the true ending. Um, that is a choice. Stephen King will give you that choice, and it is monologue. He does break. He goes. That's the only time when he does break the fourth wall, kind of thing, and he specifically talks to the reader. Um, you
And man,
you
I
have
love
that
how
same
now,
choice.
sad, but I
yes.
have to wait to the end. But
And now
It,
Evil, look, Phil and Trev now will have that decision to make. Will they stop or will they continue?
You know,
We'll
though,
have
at the
to
same
see.
time, I don't think that this is necessarily the last Dark Tower book that you're going to see. You know, I have a feeling.
Well, we know it's not. There's one more.
There's
There's
one
8.
more
Oh,
4 point. It's actually
This
for
is the
4
end of the main series, but there is like a
There is an
series.
8th book.
And
there is a like, hey, let's go back to the
King
and
has
okay, but
he wants
and
to do another book, but I don't know if he'll
he's
ever
hinted
do.
recently heavy and 3 times this year already. So I feel like we will be getting another Dark Tower related book. I don't know if it's going to be like main plot or if it's going to be like they're back again or if it's going to be another one
One
of these side. But he has hinted heavily that the wheel for him has been turning again.
well, I mean, he wrote his own out, like, hey, this is another world.
There's many ways. So
Yeah.
I actually have like a whole Reddit forum on like and you're talking about there's thousands of answers on that one question. How like if King approached the series again,
now
how would he approach it kind of thing? And there's thousands of answers. Like
he's
the
real busy
post-tronics part of the story
filming.
could be one. Go ahead, Aaron.
They're making the long walk. They're real
Oh yeah.
busy doing it right now, and I'm sure Stephen
Mm.
King has a hand in it.
And the Walking Verse is Dark Tower related. You know, it's another world right next to it. Yeah, but that's basically it. We are from this point on at the attack at Algul Siento. That's the next chapter we're reading. But after this, we're reading all the way to the end of the book. And like I said, there is 2 ending. Y'all do have that choice. You can get to that ending and stop reading where Stephen King tells you to. I mean, that's up to y'all. Me, I couldn't do it. Even though it's explained that you have that option, like I had to know kind of thing.
Yep, I blew right past that too.
Yep, but that I see is that the way Roland perceives those Stephen King related books within the series as a trap. I see that first ending as a trap kind of thing. Let's put it that way. If you stop there, that's the trap. Um,
Can we
no,
talk
but
about Susanna getting her trike? It's a trike with overinflated tires. It's got a minigun on the front of it.
it was made like
it's just like,
specifically kind of for her in
Mad Max
mind.
style.
It's a Rambo bike.
Yeah.
Right? That's so
Well,
awesome.
No,
where you
could we
go
talk about the cave and everything that's in the cave? You're talking about the arsenal that they have. They're talking. I mean, just weight alone. He says it's 3.5 metric tons of ammunition. Like how much? And they talk about AKs. They talk about sneeches. They talk about, like
Lasers.
we're talking about trust, right? From these 3 guys. After seeing that cave, like I don't think there could be an issue with trust anymore. Like, man, you talk about getting hooked up to the
see
18th degree, right? This is that point in Dragon Ball Z when Goku finally went Super Saiyan after get beat the hell up. That's what this point is like, hey, yeah, y'all are gunslingers, right? And y'all like guns? Here's a cave full of every known weapon, and not only that, but there's food. There's, like you said, the trike. There's not only, but just the sleeping bags. It wasn't just sleeping bags. There's sleeping bags on air mattresses, like for
Inflatable
extra added,
mattress.
yeah, like extra added comfort. Like, really, they
one
got
thing
hooked up.
though, that we were talking about what we're going on about where you got to make the choice to go on in the story or stop. I was just gonna say that I think that actually making that choice actually plays into the story. So think about that a lot too when you read that part, because I think it does matter if you stop or if you go on. Like I think
And
it says something about the story.
and I do know that there are people in this world that have actually stopped at that ending. That is a thing that people have not read past that point. Maybe knowing things
And I'm
about past that point.
we mentioned it at the beginning of the show, addiction.
Hmm.
Roland being a tower junkie.
And then
he
going
is.
in armed, that
There's
you
like
know that at the end it's going to piss you off.
there, there's
Are
three
we
words
counting?
at the beginning of this tale: resumption, addiction, revelation. I'll just leave you at that. No, but there are a lot of things that are about to happen. There's excitement, lots of action, a lot more horror,
We'll
a
say
lot more sadness.
the pace kind of slows, but yeah, there's a lot more sadness. It's about to get a little more dreary. Where we've had a lot of hope and a lot of good happening, good luck, and making it as far as we have, and patience and fast and going. Like now, things are about to kind of get slowed down and get dreary.
All I can say is we're going to get a lot more Crimson King. We're going to learn a lot more about him. We're going to learn a lot more about Castle Discordia. We're going to learn a lot more about Mordred. We're going to learn a lot more about Roland. But will Roland reach the Dark Tower in 2 weeks? We're going to find out. Will everybody be with Roland at the end? In 2 weeks, we're going to find out. Um, you know, there's a lot. Just like in this little, like, not little, but 340 something pages. Yeah, we're about to read a little more than that. So imagine everything that just happened in that segment, man. I mean, this next part is just as much filled as the next part. There are some slow parts, but I mean, it's just pretty much kind of the same motif. But
Yeah,
guys, I want to thank y'all.
there's a lot to tie up.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's right. There's a lot to tie up.
Oh, there is, and we get a crap ton more information. It's crazy how much of the main series information gets plugged in right at the end. Um, Especially when it comes to a lot of the red, I'll say. That's like ever since we met Callahan, it was like, oh, there's vampires and Tahine and the Doctor Book. It's like he's been throwing all kinds of stuff at it. I love it, but it has been kind of in rush mode. Um, the guys, I want to thank my panel, my quartet, and Trev, Steve, Aaron, Phil. I know Namman's out there, and get well, buddy. Um,
Namman.
but that is this episode for us. We'll be back in 2 weeks talking about the end of the series, trying to find out if these guys' predictions come true. But man, all great answers, great thoughts. But that's all I got for you guys. Thanks for being here with us. We will see you in 2 weeks. Say bye. That's all I got for you.
Yeah.